You won't believe what happened in today's story.
The barn door should have been shut. Bill knew it because he himself had fastened the heavy rusted padlock on the latch that afternoon. He had checked it twice before walking back to the farmhouse. Yet now, with dusk crawling over the empty fields, the door swayed open on its hinges, groaning softly as if beckoning him inside. "Damn it," he muttered, stepping onto the overgrown path. Inside, the air was thick and unmoving, the kind of darkness that swallowed the beam of his flashlight. From somewhere in the distance, dogs began to bark sharp, frantic bursts that carried across the fields. Their voices had the desperate edge of warning. Bill froze at the threshold. The padlock still hung closed on the latch, untouched, and yet the wooden door yawned wide, bent as though something had forced its way through the iron. He stepped in, dust stirred beneath his boots, rising in pale clouds. Within that haze, his light caught on something impossible: footprints. Human, bare, pressed deep into the dust, they led across the floor toward the hayloft ladder, then vanished into the darkness above. There were no prints coming back down. "Who's there?" His voice cracked, echoing too loudly against the rafters. The reply was a sharp metallic clang, like a tool dropped from height. The sound reverberated through the beams before fading into silence. Then, the creak of wood, the long groan of a stair shifting under invisible weight. A childhood memory slammed into him, lying in bed on summer nights, hearing the same distant thuds from the barn when his grandfather went out after dark. Back then, Bill had told himself it was nothing but imagination, the games of a frightened boy. Now the icy swell in his chest told him otherwise. He tightened his grip on the flashlight and climbed the first step. The board whined beneath his weight. Outside, the dogs erupted again, a chorus of howls rising in unison, raw and piercing, like they had seen a predator. At the top, the loft stretched empty, nothing but scattered hay and a rusted pitchfork leaning against the wall. Yet the air felt thick, saturated, almost heavy with someone's breath. In the corner, the hay lay pressed into a hollow, as if a body had been resting there not long ago. No handprints, no belongings. Just the faint smell of damp earth and an acrid tang of metal on his tongue, as though he had inhaled rust. Suddenly the barn door slammed shut below hard, as if struck by unseen palms. The flashlight flickered in his grip. Outside, the dogs fell silent mid-bark, their voices cut off in one brutal instant. The silence pressed in, suffocating. Bill understood then, someone or something was still in the barn with him. Part 2, the black dog. Bill's pulse hammered in his ears as he froze in the loft, listening. The barn seemed alive with a slow, deliberate breathing, each creak of timber echoing like a footstep. He forced himself to take another step, scanning the shadows with the trembling beam of his flashlight. Then he saw it. A pair of eyes glowed in the dark, low to the ground, reflecting the light in a way that made his stomach twist. At first, he thought it was a reflection from some farm equipment, but then the shape emerged, large, muscular, black as tar. The animal's fur shimmered in faint streaks of moonlight, moving unnaturally smooth, like liquid. Its head tilted, watching him, and a low growl rumbled from deep within its chest. The dogs outside barked again, but not at him, at this thing. Their howls were frantic warnings, sharp and frantic, carried across the fields like urgent messengers. Bill's mind raced. Black dogs, old legends whispered by his grandmother. They were omens, shadowed spirits bound to haunt the land, warning or punishing those who disturbed the balance. He had laughed at such stories as a boy, but now, heart-hammering, he realized the tales had been warnings, not myths. The black dog stepped forward, and the air itself seemed to thicken. Each movement was almost silent, but the sense of weight and presence pressed against him like a physical force. He backed toward the loft wall, tripping over hay bales, the flashlight swinging wildly. Then it spoke, not with words, but a sound that crawled under his skin, a deep, resonant growl that seemed to echo inside his skull. Memories surged unbidden. Childhood nights spent hearing the same growl through the walls, the old farm hands whispering about the Watcher, the shadow that prowled while the adults turned their backs. Bill had always blamed the wind, always blamed his imagination. Now he could not. He stumbled back to the ladder, hands shaking, and began descending, the beam of the flashlight trembling across the loft boards. The black dog followed, silent and deliberate. Each step Bill took felt heavier, as if the floor itself resisted him. At the bottom, the barn door began to rattle. A wind, no, too sudden, too precise. The door shook violently, then slammed open for a moment before slamming shut again, cutting off any exit. Bill's breath caught. He was trapped. Then the growl softened, almost contemplative, as if the creature was considering him, measuring his fear. And for the first time, Bill noticed a second sound, faint scratching, like claws against wood, coming from the far corner of the barn. Something else moved there, hidden, unseen, but alive. The dogs outside had gone silent entirely, the night holding its breath. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. Bill knew he could not run, not tonight, not with that presence watching, waiting. All he could do was stare, heart hammering, as the black dog stepped closer, its eyes burning like coals in the dark, and wonder whether the farm's old ghosts had finally come to collect what had been theirs all along. And somewhere deep in the darkness, a faint, whispering voice echoed, like a memory long buried, calling his name. Part 3: Whispers in the Hay. Bill sank to the floor, pressing his back against the cool wood of the barn wall. The black dog's eyes never left him, glowing in the darkness like molten coals. Every instinct screamed to move, to escape, but the door had been shut again, as if the barn itself had claimed him. A faint scratching came from the corner where the shadows pooled thickest. His flashlight trembled in his hand, casting long, spidery beams across the hay-strewn floor. The sound repeated, slow, deliberate, like someone, or something, tracing the floor with fingertips. "Who's there?" Bill's voice broke the silence, sharp and trembling. The words hung in the barn like smoke. No answer came, just the growl of the black dog, low and measured. Then, faintly, almost beneath the sound of his own heartbeat, he heard it, a whisper. Bill froze. The sound was soft, fragile, like the rustling of dry leaves, but unmistakably human. "Bill!" His name, drawn out, intimate, familiar. He shook his head, trying to clear the memory, but the whisper returned, closer now, moving through the hay like a living thing. "Bill, come back." The barn shifted around him. A sudden gust, or something like it, blew through the loft, scattering hay and dust into the beam of the flashlight. Shapes flickered in the corners. The faint outline of a boy, a shadowed woman, forms half-remembered, half-imagined. His childhood flashed before his eyes, summer nights spent in bed, listening to the barn, Grandpa's stern warnings about wandering after dark, the laughter and scolding voices of his siblings. The black dog shifted, circling, keeping him pinned, its growl rising to a low, rumbling chorus. Bill realized the creature wasn't just watching, it was guarding, or perhaps waiting for him to understand. And then he saw the footprints again. Bare human pressed deep into the hay, leading away from the shadows and toward the far wall. No one had descended from the loft, yet here they were. His grandfather's voice, distant and stern, echoed in his memory. "Some things on the farm aren't ours to touch." A sudden movement at the far end of the barn drew his attention. A figure stepped from the shadows, small, childlike, but impossibly still. Its face hidden beneath a hood of darkness, it held out a hand, pointing toward the loft. Bill's throat went dry, every muscle screamed to run, but the black dog's growl stopped him. Somehow, he knew that step would trigger something irreversible. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, forming words he hadn't heard in decades. "Remember, remember, remember." Bill's vision blurred. The barn faded into memory and present, interweaving, the smell of damp hay, the rusted metal of tools, the distant echoes of laughter, the stifling fear, and the relentless, watchful presence of the black dog. And then abruptly, silence. The dog had moved closer, nose almost touching his hand, eyes glowing like lanterns. The figure vanished, the footprints faded, and the barn seemed to breathe again, settling into stillness. The only sound left was Bill's ragged breathing and the soft, distant howl of the farm dogs outside, finally returning to their patrol. Bill knew one thing: the barn had revealed its secrets tonight, and it was only the beginning. Part 4: Echoes of the Past. Bill sat in the loft, the flashlight dim in his shaking hands. The black dog lay just beyond the beam, unnervingly calm now, like it had finished its inspection but still held the power to act. The barn smelled of old hay, dust, and something iron-like that made his stomach churn. He remembered the stories Grandpa used to tell, half laughing, half serious, of the shadows that lingered on the farm, of things that walked the fields when no one was looking, of a presence tied to the land itself. As a child, he had been terrified. As a man, he had dismissed them. But tonight, every story became flesh, bone, and breath. A sudden rustle behind the loft wall made him spin. The shadows moved unnaturally, coiling and stretching, forming the shapes of people long gone, his parents, siblings, even himself as a boy, all frozen mid-motion, silent witnesses. Their eyes followed him, hollow and accusing. The black dog growled softly, low and steady, and the visions receded. But another sound replaced them, the whispering of voices, unintelligible at first, then growing clearer, weaving through the rafters and across the barn floor. "We were here, we watched, we warned." Bill's heart raced. These were not ghosts seeking vengeance. They were echoes, fragments of memory, of fear, of life lived and lost on this farm. Every night he had felt the barn's presence. Every summer he had heard the footsteps, the thuds, the growls. The farm had been alive in ways he had never understood. The black dog shifted closer, its eyes fixed on him with an almost human intelligence. And in that moment, Bill realized it was not an intruder. It was a guardian, a sentinel tied to the echoes, a keeper of what the barn remembered. He swallowed hard, forcing his fear into a shaky resolve. I understand, he whispered. I remember. The voices softened, almost approving. The figures in the shadows receded into nothingness. And as Bill exhaled, a calm settled over the loft, the kind that comes not from safety, but from acknowledgement. The barn door creaked open slightly, letting in the silver light of dawn. The black dog stepped aside, allowing Bill to descend. Outside, the field stretched empty, quiet, yet somehow charged with the memory of the night's events. The farm seemed to breathe in relief or perhaps satisfaction. Bill walked down the path toward the farmhouse, the padlock still dangling from the barn door. He did not look back, but he knew the black dog waited, patient and eternal, for the next soul who might disturb the balance. And for the first time, Bill understood that the farm was not just land and buildings. It was a living memory, a witness to generations, a keeper of truths too subtle for casual eyes. He reached the farmhouse steps, his hands trembling but steady in purpose. He would not speak of tonight, not yet, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty: some doors once opened could never be closed entirely. The black dog remained in the shadows, its eyes fading with the morning mist, a silent sentinel to the echoes of the past. Part V. Family Shadows. Days passed, but the barn's presence lingered. Bill couldn't shake the feeling that the air itself remembered that night. Even sunlight could not touch the corners where shadows clung too close, where memories whispered beneath the floorboards. He found himself wandering the farmhouse at odd hours, drawn to the places that had always been familiar. The kitchen smelled of stale bread and iron, the same smell he remembered from his childhood, and yet now it carried an undertone he could not name. Every creak of floorboard, every groan of the old wood, sounded like footsteps echoing from another time. Bill's sister Mary noticed his unease when she came to visit. "You've been different," she said, her voice soft but wary. "Are you still thinking about the barn?" I don't know," he admitted. "Something's there, something s always been there. Not just the barn, but the land, the house, us, the farm remembers." Mary frowned. "Grandpa used to warn us about that. He said the farm held more than crops and cattle, that it held memories and sometimes anger." Bill nodded, his thoughts drifting to that night, to the black dog, to the whispers and visions in the loft. "It's not anger," he said slowly. "It's vigilance. Something watches and it waits. It isn't malicious, it's protective, but it's bound to the family, to the land." That evening he returned to the barn, the black dog waiting as if it had known he would come. The air inside was cooler than outside, thick with the scent of earth and old hay. Shadows shifted in the corners, but this time Bill did not fear them. "You're part of it now," he whispered to the dog. "You're part of us." The dog's eyes glimmered, almost approving, and he felt a strange kinship with the creature. Memories from his childhood, arguments with his siblings, the stern scolding of his father, the laughter of long-gone cousins, rose to the surface, each echoing off the barn walls. And then the whispers returned, soft but unmistakable, threading through the rafters. "Remember, protect, guide." Bill understood at last. The family's legacy was not in ownership or wealth, but in stewardship. The farm, the barn, the land itself carried memory and consciousness passed down through generations. His task was clear: to listen, to honor, and to protect the balance that had been maintained by those before him. Outside, the farm dogs barked once sharply, then fell silent. The wind stirred the fields, carrying with it the faintest hint of movement in the shadows. Bill felt the black dog at his side, a guardian not only of the barn but of the family itself. He stepped back toward the farmhouse, the last traces of fear melting into a deep, resolute calm. He was no longer just Bill, the man who lived on the old farm. He was Bill, the keeper of its stories, its memories, and its shadows. And the farm, patient and eternal, seemed to acknowledge him, settling into a quiet rhythm that belonged neither entirely to the past nor entirely to the present. The night would come again and the whispers would return, but Bill would be ready. Part 6. The Harvest of Shadows. Autumn arrived with a chill that cut through the farm like a whispering blade. The fields, once golden with crops, now lay bare, and the wind carried a hollow resonance, echoing across the empty soil. Bill felt it in his bones. The farm was stirring again. The barn seemed to breathe in the twilight, its dark silhouette looming against the fading sky. He stepped inside, flashlight in hand, but did not need it. The black dog's presence illuminated the path in ways he could feel rather than see. Shadows clung to the rafters, twisting into forms that were both familiar and alien. His ancestors' echoes swirled around him, whispering of deeds long past, of mistakes repeated and lessons ignored. Then he heard it, laughter, children's laughter, soft and fleeting, drifting across the loft. It was the same sound he remembered from his own youth, yet layered with dozens of others, some bright, some twisted with sorrow. The whispers grew louder, forming patterns he could almost understand. "Bill, remember, choose." The black dog growled low, warning him to pay attention. Bill's gaze swept the loft, landing on the hay bales pressed into depressions like impressions of resting bodies. Bare footprints crossed the floor, leading toward a far corner where the air shimmered unnaturally. He moved forward cautiously, heart pounding, as the whispers became clearer. The past is not done. The farm remembers, the family remembers. A sudden gust slammed the barn doors, rattling the beams above. Shadows coalesced into a more solid shape, a figure tall and dark, its face obscured, limbs fluid and unnatural. It stepped forward and the black dog growled, standing firmly between Bill and the shadow. Bill's breath caught. This was not just memory. This was something old, ancient, part of the farm's history, bound to it like roots to soil. It pulsed with intention, waiting to see how he would respond. He thought of his childhood, of the arguments with his siblings, of Grandpa's warnings, of nights spent hearing the thuds and growls. He thought of Mary's words, of the responsibility he now carried. "I remember," he said aloud, voice steady though trembling. "I understand what you are, I understand what we are." The shadow paused, then slowly receded, blending back into the darkness, leaving only the whisper of a breeze and the fading scent of iron and hay. The black dog relaxed, settling its massive body against the floor, eyes still glowing faintly. Bill knelt, touching the floor, feeling the vibrations of countless memories running through the barn. He realized that the farm did not want to harm. It demanded recognition, respect, and guardianship. Outside, the wind carried the faint echo of dogs barking, a reminder that life continued beyond the barn. Bill rose, steadier now, understanding his role. The farm, the barn, the shadows, they were intertwined with him, and he with them. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, dark shapes across the fields. The black dog followed him to the door, then paused, watching. Its eyes held a quiet approval, a recognition of his acceptance. Bill stepped outside, the evening air crisp, carrying the whispers of the past. He did not look back at the barn. He knew it would always be there, watching, remembering, waiting, and that he, too, was now part of its eternal memory. The farm was alive as it always had been, and Bill was finally awake to its rhythm. Part 7, Night of the Reckoning. The first snow fell silently, dusting the fields with a ghostly white. The farmhouse seemed smaller under the weight of the night, and the barn loomed larger, its silhouette etched sharply against the moonlight. Bill could feel the tension in the air. The farm itself seemed to hold its breath. That night the black dog appeared at the threshold, as if summoned. Its eyes glowed faintly, guiding him across the yard. The wind carried voices, soft, overlapping whispers that Bill now recognized as the collective memory of his family, of the land, of every soul that had walked the fields before him. Inside the barn, shadows writhed along the walls. The loft's air pulsed with movement, figures materialized, some resembling his ancestors, some children, some people he had never seen. All of them stared at him, unblinking, expectant. A single voice rose above the others, sharp and commanding. "Bill, the reckoning has come. Will you uphold the legacy?" The black dog growled low but did not move to attack. Bill felt the weight of generations pressing on him, the sins, the regrets, the secrets buried under hay, under soil, under memory itself. Then he saw it, the shadow from the harvest night, now solid and immense, stretching to fill the loft. Its presence was suffocating, pressing on his chest, demanding recognition. Bill felt panic claw at him, but he steadied himself, breathing deeply, forcing fear into comprehension. "I will," he said firmly, voice echoing through the rafters. "I will remember, I will protect, I will guide." The shadows froze, the whispers halted, leaving a hollow silence that vibrated in his skull. Then slowly the figures began to bow, one by one, acknowledging him. The black dog stepped closer, brushing its massive head against his leg, approving, sentinel and companion both. The immense shadow receded, dissolving into strands of mist that twined around the rafters before vanishing completely. The barn exhaled as if relieved, and the temperature shifted, the oppressive heaviness lifting, replaced by calm. Bill knew in that moment that he had been tested. The farm, the barn, the black dog, and the echoes of the past had demanded recognition, and he had answered. Outside, the snow continued to fall, pristine and quiet. The dogs barked in the distance, normal life resuming as if nothing had happened. Bill stepped out of the barn, feeling its pulse beneath his feet, knowing he was part of something eternal. The night was still but alive with memory. Bill understood now that he was no longer merely a man living on a farm. He was the keeper, the witness, the guardian of every shadow, every whisper, every secret the land held. The black dog sat at the edge of the field, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight, a silent partner in the stewardship of time, memory, and legacy. And Bill finally walked toward the farmhouse with certainty, knowing the reckoning had passed, but the echoes would remain as they always had, as they always would. Part 8: Secrets Beneath the Floorboards. The first light of winter morning streamed through the cracked windows of the farmhouse, painting the kitchen in pale gold. Bill moved quietly, still alert to the echoes of the barn, though the oppressive weight of the past nights had lessened. The black dog slept by the door, its chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, a sentinel even in repose. He could no longer ignore the nagging curiosity that had built over weeks, the hidden corners of the farmhouse itself. Memories stirred in the air, laughter, arguments, whispered warnings. Something had always been beneath the floorboards, he realized, a presence waiting, patient and silent. Armed with a crowbar and the determination of a man who had faced generations of ghosts, Bill lifted a floorboard in the kitchen. Dust erupted like a storm, curling around him in pale clouds. Beneath he found small objects carefully tucked away, a child's wooden toy, faded letters tied with string, and a bundle of photographs, yellowed and fraying. He sifted through them slowly, each piece a fragment of forgotten life. His mother as a girl, his grandfather with a stern smile, his own parents as young lovers. And then he found the letters, notes written in shaky handwriting, addressed to descendants he had never met. They spoke of responsibility, of balance, of the farm's silent guardians, the black dog, the whispers, the shadows. One note chilled him. When the shadows stir, do not flee. Face them, remember them, and the farm will know you as its own. Bill understood fully. The farm's mysteries were entwined with the family, and the black dog was not just a creature. It was a keeper of the land, a witness to generations, a reminder that the past was never truly gone. Suddenly a chill swept through the room. The whispers returned, soft but urgent. The floorboards beneath him vibrated subtly, as if the memories themselves were trying to speak. The black dog rose, ears pricked, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Bill knelt, placing the letters back carefully, and whispered, "I remember. I understand. I will protect what is ours." For a moment the house held its breath. Then the vibrations ceased, the whispers softened, and the dog lay down again, satisfied. The balance had been acknowledged once more. Outside, the winter sun reflected off the frost-covered fields. Bill stepped to the door, taking in the familiar landscape. The farm was more than land. It was memory, family, and guardianship intertwined. Every shadow, every whisper, every creak of timber was a story, and he was now a part of it. He looked back at the barn, still looming dark and silent at the edge of the fields. The black dog followed his gaze, eyes glimmering like embers. Together they understood. Some secrets could not be hidden forever, but some could be honored, protected, and remembered. And Bill, heir to the land and its memories, knew his task had only just begun. Part 9: The Gathering Shadows. Night fell early, heavy and dense, blanketing the fields in near-total darkness. The farmhouse windows glowed faintly, warm and welcoming, yet Bill felt the pull of the barn, the old sentinel of memory and shadow, drawing him once more. He knew this night would be different. The farm's whispers had grown insistent, urgent, almost commanding. The black dog waited at the edge of the yard, its eyes like molten coals, fixed and unwavering. Bill approached it with steady steps, though his pulse raced. The air around the barn thrummed with life, memories vibrating through the timbers. Shadows shifted unnaturally inside, stretching long and dark, as if the barn itself had grown taller, wider, alive with the presence of countless generations. As he entered, the whispers multiplied, forming overlapping voices, old arguments between siblings, tender memories of childhood laughter, stern warnings from grandparents long gone. And beneath it all, a new tone, a deep, resonant voice that vibrated in his chest. "Tonight you face what you are meant to face. Will you remember? Will you endure?" The black dog circled him slowly, growl low and steady, eyes tracking every movement of the shifting shadows. From the loft, the temperature dropped sharply and the air thickened, almost suffocating. Shapes emerged, familiar and alien, his ancestors, his siblings as children, faces of strangers who had once walked the farm, all gathered in a silent vigil. Bill's heart pounded. He understood at last. This was a reckoning, a culmination of all the memories, all the presences, all the guardianship the farm demanded. He could not run. He could only stand, acknowledge, and endure. The shadows converged, coiling and twisting, forming a massive shape that towered over him, its features shifting between faces he knew and faces he did not. The black dog positioned itself firmly at his side, a living anchor in the storm of memory. Bill, the voice was everywhere, inside his mind, around him, beneath his feet. Will you carry the weight of all who came before? He drew a deep, shivering breath. I will, he said firmly. I remember, I honor, I protect. The shadows halted, the shape stabilizing. The whispers softened, forming a single harmonious murmur that resonated through the barn, then fading into silence. The immense pressure lifted, leaving only a quiet stillness, almost reverent. The black dog sat, eyes glowing faintly, its presence affirming that the trial had been passed. Bill's gaze swept the loft and the barn floor. The footprints, the impressions in the hay, the echoes of voices, they were all there, silent, settled, acknowledged. Outside, the wind whispered across the fields, carrying with it a sense of closure. The farmhouse lights glowed warmly, and the snow reflected the moonlight, calm and still. Bill stepped into the yard, the black dog following, knowing that though the night's trial had ended, vigilance and guardianship were eternal. He looked back at the barn, tall and dark against the horizon. It was no longer a place of fear, but a testament to memory, family, and the unseen threads that bound them all. Bill understood fully. The farm, the shadows, the black dog, they were part of him and he of them. The night was quiet but alive. The echoes of the past had been acknowledged, and Bill, heir and guardian, finally felt the weight of his legacy settle into a resolute calm. Part 10: Dawn of Memory. The first rays of dawn painted the farmhouse and fields in soft gold and silver, melting the shadows that had haunted the barn for generations. Bill stepped out onto the frost-covered ground, feeling the crisp air fill his lungs. The black dog stood at his side, still vigilant, yet calm, its eyes reflecting the morning light with quiet intelligence. The farm was alive, not with menace, but with memory. Every beam, every floorboard, every hollow in the hay seemed to hum softly, resonating with the lives that had passed through them. Bill finally understood. The whispers, the shadows, the black dog, they were all guardians, keeping the balance between the past and the present. He walked toward the barn, each step measured, reverent. The padlock still hung on the door, rusted and immovable, yet the barn no longer felt threatening. Inside, the loft was empty, the hay smooth and unbroken. The shadows had settled, the echoes of voices softened to gentle murmurs. Bill knelt in the center of the loft, closing his eyes. Memories of his childhood, of arguments and laughter, of his grandparents' warnings, rose clearly, weaving together with the visions he had witnessed in the barn. He felt the weight of generations pressing not as burden but as guidance. He was the keeper now, the link between what had been and what would come. The black dog nudged his hand, firm and warm despite its dark fur. Bill reached out, understanding that their bond was no longer one of fear or obligation, but of trust. Together, they had acknowledged the farm's memories, honored the family's past, and preserved the balance the land demanded. Outside, the snow glimmered under the rising sun, fields stretching endlessly, silent yet brimming with unseen life. The farmhouse seemed smaller now, human again, a home rather than a fortress against memory. Bill turned back once toward the barn, a quiet smile touching his lips. It was a sentinel, yes, but also a teacher, a keeper of stories that only the patient and courageous could ever fully understand. He rose, feeling the calm resolve of a man who had faced shadows, whispers, and guardians, and had emerged not broken but strengthened. The black dog followed him back to the farmhouse, its eyes still glowing faintly, ever watchful, a companion and protector. Bill stepped inside, the warmth of the kitchen embracing him. The whispers were gone, the shadows settled, the barn silent, but the memory of it, the awareness, and the legacy remained. He finally understood the truth his family had tried to pass down. The farm was alive with memory, and those who walked it with respect and courage became a part of it. He had listened, he had remembered, and now he was its guardian. Outside, the first morning light stretched across the fields, and the black dog watched the horizon, a silent witness to the dawn of memory. Bill knew the nights of whispers and shadows were not gone, they were eternal, but so was he, part of the farm, part of its stories, part of its soul. The cycle would continue, as it always had, and now Bill would endure it, honor it, and protect it forevermore.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to see more stories.